Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I want to begin by saying how proud I am to be part of a government that gets to put Guyana back together again after the calamity that was the APNU AFC coalition put us in. Since the PBPC's government returned to power, Mr. Speaker, confidence has been restored in the economy. Investors are flocking Guyana. There is a breath of fresh air that fills this land with optimism. And citizens can once again look forward to a future, a bright future with the People's Progressive Party Civic. Budget 2021, quite fittingly, is themed a path to recovery, economic dynamism, and resilience. It captures the vision of President Ali for our country and makes clear the focus of this government. And we are focused on greater and better prosperity for all the people of Guyana. We are not busy acquiring gold bands and beds off the backs of public servants. We are focused on returning Guyana to glory. While the members across the floor are busy making noise and spouting useless commentary, the members on this side cannot wait to begin implementing the plans and policies of this PBPC government. Plans and policies that will put money in the pockets of every Guyanese, rebuild the security and health sectors, provide jobs, and above all, bring hope back to our people. The members across the floor, Mr. Speaker, are not bothered by the challenges that are facing our fellow citizens. No, they want to rabble rouse. The truth is, Mr. Speaker, they cannot discuss any budget in any sensible way because they do not have the knowledge or skills to do so. And more importantly, they cannot do so because they have failed. The APNU AFC government failed to implement the lofty plans that they gabbed about while in government. They failed to come up with the right strategies to tackle the many challenges that face our country, even with the goodwill they enjoyed in 2015. They have failed, Mr. Speaker, failed, and they know it. This nation cannot and must never forget the havoc that they wreaked on our fledgling democracy less than a year ago. We must never forget the war they declared on this nation when they refused to give up power. We must never forget that it is the PBPC, along with all the other guardians of democracy, that fought desperately for 5 long months to ensure that the votes cast is its cast for the party that for which the majority of this country favored, and that it was accounted for. In the face of challenges that threatened to undo us and a global pandemic at the time, the PPPC, under the leadership of His Excellency President Dr. Mohammed Irfan Ali, stayed the course. Because, Mr. Speaker...
Honourable Member, second reference, but there's a standing order with respect to using the President's name to influence, right? So we have circulated His Excellency's speech. I'm sure there are ample quotes that you can quote if you want to invoke the name of His Excellency.
Because, Mr. Speaker, it is the PBPC that has the knowledge, the skills, and the competence to lead this country. to save it from the hell that the APNU AFC had plunged it. And so we want to get on with development. We want to get this country back on track, and Budget 2021 sees us firmly on the path that can only lead us to success. But Mr. Speaker, when you listen to the previous speakers, including the last speaker and those from the opposition, you wonder if we are living in the same country. You wonder if these are the same persons for many whom were in office for the last 5 years. You wonder. And Mr. Speaker, much has been said that they have been claiming that they were not consulted. But Mr. Speaker, they have refused to recognize a People's Progressive Party civic government and a president, a duly elected president. And if you do not recognize, how can we recognize you as the opposition? Mr. Speaker, they criticize the allocations for the school cash grants. But Mr. Speaker, if that is not laughable, what is not? They, in 2015, removed the program completely, not even probably giving $1. And they are here in this house criticizing the amount of $15,000 for every child. Mr. Speaker, they have criticized the COVID cash grant program. When this nation, when many of us here for the 5 months were fighting to ensure that our votes were recognized, when many of them in this dome from the opposition were here daily in the recount, they, Mr. Speaker, were controlling the purses, they were controlling the budget, they were controlling the resources of the state. And while we were going through a COVID pandemic, not $1 or not one resource or not one major activity, not one hamper did they send to communities for relief for persons who were suffering from the COVID pandemic. But yet you come here, you are in government at that time, but yet you come here to criticize the COVID cash grant program.
Just use honorable before they.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, much has been said about the public service. But, Mr. Speaker, they probably forgot when the then Minister of State, the Honorable now Leader of Opposition, Joseph Harmon, in a circle in 2015, indicated that candidates in elections that could not be in public service, that they had to be professionalized, and they terminated over 2,000 public servants, from cleaners to PSs, including 2 who are here sitting on this side of the government, and replace them, Mr. Speaker, with candidates and activists embedded in every ministry and agency. Mr. Speaker, much has been said, and they're asking about free education that we promise at university. But, Mr. Speaker, the PPPC's manifesto is there for all to see, and it is for all to read. But if you have a comprehension deficit, then, Mr. Speaker, the many courses that are being offered by the Honorable Minister of Public Service I would ask that many of them, they apply for such courses, and this time we will legitimately allow them to have the scholarship. And so, Mr. Speaker, we have committed that we will deliver and we will have free university education. But we never said that it was going to be happening on our first budget presentation. We said between our first term. And Mr. Speaker, I'm reminded by the last speaker, I'm wondering if this was the same person, in addition to coming to the opposition office in 2018, praise the People's Progressive Party Civic, the General Secretary of the GTU, Mr. Speaker, said that teachers receive more in terms of salary and other benefits when the PPPC government was in office during the pre-2015 era, in comparison to what was being given to them at the time by the APNU-AFC coalition government. Who said that, Mr. Speaker? In addition to that, Mr. Speaker, the honorable member forgot that the then minister said and called the teachers who had to strike, they called them selfish. The honorable then Keith Scott called the teachers selfish. Did we forget this? Avaricious and greedy, calling the Amerindians. Did we forget this, Mr. Speaker? And so, Mr. Speaker, we have members from the other side that are coming here and pretending that they didn't just come out of office. And so you have claims by the former Minister of Education that the students then only topped under the APNU-AFC. And they said, but let me repeat for you, you won't understand. The years when Guyanese topped in the Caribbean, Mr. Speaker, 1997, let me repeat again, 1999, 2003, you don't want to hear it, 2006, 2007, 2008, 2009, 2011, 2012, 2013, 2014, 2017. And so, Mr. Speaker, you can come here and pretend. Mr. Speaker, since the Honorable Region 2 want to hear, let me give him a little. Mr. Speaker, I stand here today proud as the Minister of Housing and Water to share with this House and the citizens who are paying attention, not those who are making noise on the other side. Because home ownership, Mr. Speaker, is arguably the main goal of every Guyanese citizen. And this PPPC has always made housing a priority. The last government decentralized the housing. We set up a Ministry of Housing and Water. What did they do? They put the housing as a subset under a ministry, just like what they did with the Labor Department. Today, Mr. Speaker, home ownership is arguably the main goal of every Guyanese citizen. And we have made housing affordable and a priority. Today, many areas that were populated with bush are home to thriving communities thanks to the foresight and the vision of the PPPC government. But the last 5 years of the incompetent coalition government derailed the housing drive that was even left by now our president and the then Minister of Housing and Water. Their ideas for housing were weak and inadequate. Mr. Speaker, be reminded that it was the coalition government that played musical chairs with the housing and water sectors. Multiple ministers, board chairmen, directors fired the public servants, and yet they did not and could not clear the backlog and reduce the processing for housing applications, or even to meet the targets that they set. They were too busy, for example, getting their husband into contracts or even asking for laptops. They promised to end discrimination, allocation of lands, yet our learned Attorney General is now tasked with recovering hundreds of acres of lands that they doled out to their friends and family. They promised affordable housing to teachers, public servants, nurses, discipline forces, among others, and they did not deliver. They promised incentives to private sector to reduce construction costs, and again could not deliver, Mr. Speaker. They could not keep any of the promises that they made in their own manifesto. Imagine, as has been said, between 2010 and 2015, 22,000 plus house lots were given out to citizens by the PPPC government then. Astonishingly, under the APNU-AFC coalition, 7,534 house lots in 5 years. And Mr. Speaker, of that amount, 2,000 plus were allocated as part of the election gimmick and the post-election period. While we were fighting for democracy, they were busy allocating to some of their cronies. In fact, Mr. Speaker, even when the coalition had one big idea for housing, even that they could not get right. Their big idea, let's introduce duplexes. And they proceeded to have contractors construct duplexes, but they did not think to have the Condominium Act amended to include this type of house. The result is, Mr. Speaker, those citizens who invested their hard-earned dollars into these houses cannot get insurance or titles, and even more worrying is that the banks are not amendable to holding duplexes as collateral. How could any Minister of Housing with an ounce of sense allow this to happen? No wonder, Mr. Speaker, even though they inherited a robust housing and water sector, it was plunged into chaos for 4 years. And so it falls to us, this PPPC government, to once again rescue the housing sector. By mid-year, Mr. Speaker, the Honorable Minister of Legal Affairs will be bringing legislation to amend the Condominium Act to allow banks to accept titles for those houses, insurance companies to issue policies to those homeowners, and more importantly, to allow these homeowners to access loans for expansion. Because of these and many failures of the coalition, Mr. Speaker, in housing and water sector and every other sector for that matter, the housing sector's received an allocation of $8.9 billion, of which $6 billion is for infrastructure and utility works in new and existing areas, all aiding and advancing our commitment to allocating a minimum of 50,000 house lots to citizens within this, our first term in office. This year, Mr. Speaker, 2021 alone, we intend to allocate 10,000 house lots, 7,000, a minimum of 7,000 land titles to citizens, many of whom have been waiting for years to own their own homes. Let the House be reminded that in just 4 months in office, 3,600 house lots and 413 titles were handed over to citizens. This year, we will also build 1,000 homes for young and for low-income earners, and residents of Region 10 will also benefit from the construction of over 1,000 homes through a public-private partnership with community involvement in every step and every process. Over this 5 years, therefore, Mr. Speaker, citizens will benefit from the construction of new roads, bridges, water, and electricity, distribution networks, and improved drainage in all 10 regions. New developments, including the construction of roads, bridges, drainage, water, and electrical distribution networks, will be undertaken to complete infrastructure development works in Region number 3, Region number 4, Region number 5, and Region number 6. And if you want to hear, these include Anna Katrina, CI, Edinburgh, Stortville, Metamerzorg, Commons Lodge, LBI, Annandale, Monrepos, Providence, Prospect, Little Diamond, Grove Diamond, Vigilance, Bladenhall, and Strathspey in Region 4. Experiment, Region 5, Hampshire, Williamsburg, Ordnance Fortlands, number 75 Village, number 79 Village in Region number 6. 25 kilometers of roads within Regions 3, 4, 5, 6, 9, and 10 will be upgraded, and close to 13,500 citizens or 3,278 house lots will be delivered this year. These include Underneming in Region 2, Shanxi lot, Farfaith Harmony, Westminster, Underneming, Luston Ross, Bell West in Region 3, Farm, Covent Garden, Providence, Prospect, Perseverance, Peters Hall, Horse Stelling, Good Hope, Monrepos, Nonpareil, Hope South, Hope Estate, and Hope Dutch 4 in Region 4, Bath, Hope Experiment in Region 5, Ordnance Fortlands and Kilcoy Chesney in Region number 6, Tapaching Culvert City in Region 9, Amelia's Ward, Linden in Region 10. Our 2021 National Housing Development Program, Mr. Speaker, will include the construction of 1,000 low-income and young professional housing units in Region number 4, in Commons Lodge, Prospect, Providence, Little Diamond, and Great Diamond. In Region number 3, in Underneming and Wales. In Region number 6, Ordnance Fortlands, Hampshire, and Williamsburg. And Region number 10, Amelia's Ward. In addition, Mr. Speaker, we will distribute and we will have the home improvement subsidies, as well as build core homes in Parfaith, Harmony, and Sophia. You will be pleased to note, Mr. Speaker, that even recreational facilities have been included. Mr. Speaker, outlets to foster and enhance creative aptitudes. This is the future. The future is bright, Mr. Speaker, with a People's Progressive Party civic government. By the end of 2021, Mr. Speaker, through the CHPA Central Housing and Planning Authority, Guyanese will see a commencement of new infrastructure development works in Region number 1, Region number 2, Charity, Region number 3, Underneming, Region number 9, Lethem, and Region number 10, Amelia's Ward. Mr. Speaker, the hinterland and Amerindian communities are no exception. The record of the People's Progressive Party civic with respect to the development in hinterland community speaks for itself. In the area of housing, we will therefore commence this year the construction of 100 homes within the hinterland communities. We will continue the road construction to complete the access road from Great Diamond to Mandela, with the construction of the 4-lane highway and the heavy-duty bridge to connect at Mocha. Mr. Speaker, in addition to other users from the East Bank, the West Coast, the West Bank, in excess of 20,000 residents will directly benefit from this new access road, and over 100,000 indirectly as part of the housing area we have developed on the East Bank. Persons will therefore now have a choice to access Georgetown or onto the East Bank when they didn't have such before. Mr. Speaker, this work our government is engaged. We are focused on providing our citizens with the best housing interventions. Not only are we providing affordable housing, not only are we making them sustainable in well-developed communities, we are also ensuring that the private sector partners can contribute toward the housing drive, and so the ease of the burden of high construction and material costs. We have removed the VAT from locally produced building and construction materials, including sand, stone, concrete blocks, plywoods, logs, and lumber. This means, Mr. Speaker, that those persons who have house lots and who are beneficiaries can look forward to paying cheaper prices for building materials. Additionally, we will soon implement a single window approval system for the planning permission process, which will greatly reduce the processing time. It is no secret, Mr. Speaker, that the process to obtain a planning permit is painstaking, frustrating, and really a headache. Potential business owners are saddled with the responsibility of running back and forth to a number of government agencies, including Guyana Fire Service, the Environmental Protection Agency, and other many areas to check on the status of their permit. This PPPC government has promised to improve the ease of doing business, and so bottlenecks, like I've just described, will negatively affect this global goal of ours. Therefore, Mr. Speaker, we must recognize and recalibrate the planning permit process so that it can be more efficient and ultimately be more effectively. Mr. Speaker, that is why we will ensure that the necessary investments are made to enhance, strengthen, and modernize the capacity of the staff and the technology to be ensured that this is in process. I am happy to report, Mr. Speaker, that we have already begun the preliminary work to revamp this process. During the next few weeks, all local democratic organs will be provided with a detailed list of documents that must be submitted and a revised building application form. For these measures, these two measures alone, Mr. Speaker, will significantly reduce the processing time. The priority of making life easy for our citizens is not limited to house lot allottees. We have made provisions for the first time for homeowners to also get extra monies by raising the low-income mortgage ceiling to $12 million, as well as increasing the ceiling for mortgage issued by the New Building Society from $12 million to $15 million. This intervention was highly anticipated by homeowners, as it means, Mr. Speaker, that their interest rates will be low. And of course, that other commercial banks will now have to become more competitive. This also means that citizens will now be able to access higher loans and follows that they can now do more on their houses, and their monthly installments will be reduced as a result of lower rates, and the overall, it is the citizens that will be the winners. Mr. Speaker, key to having great communities is also to ensure that the infrastructure is in place, from street lights to green spaces to also clean water. Clean water, therefore, means a priority for the Ministry of Housing and Water. Since coming to office, Mr. Speaker, my team has identified several challenges to assess and distribute the water, from high iron content to low treated water coverage, high levels of non-revenue water, and a marked deficit in accessing water by the hinterland population. This was compounded by the cruel imposition of VAT on water, which was borne by some of our most vulnerable citizens and pensioners.
Honorable member, for you to continue, you have to get an extension.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I'd like to ask that the honourable member be given 5 minutes to conclude. Thank you.
Thank you, Honorable Member. Mr. Shearer, Honorable Member, please proceed.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. It is important for me to educate this House about the state of the water sector that we inherited. And the other side likes to trumpet the name one Van West Charles. Well, this is his legacy too. Mr. Speaker, GWI was on the verge of a financial collapse. Despite the steep tariff increase by the previous government, it had significant loss of $1.1 billion. So dire was its situation that it had to rely on bank overdraft facilities to finance situations and its operations. Sadly, but predictably for the coalition strategies, overdrafts totaling $270 million did nothing to alleviate its losses. Employment costs skyrocketed since 2015. Rental of building and the debt plagued the entity. At August 2020, GWI debt to suppliers totaled $783 million. And even worse, over 5,000 customers were denied service connections because inventory levels of service connection materials that are required to provide a service had deteriorated. Also, in August 2020, the new management inherited over 8,000 water leaks, which had been ignored for the period 2015 to August 2020. But there's good news. Since we came into government, under the stewardship of the CEO, Sheikh Bash, GWI has collected $5.3 billion in revenue, an increase of $1 billion over 2019, and this is during COVID. Its debt is reduced. It did not access overdraft facility, and overall, the financial situation of GWI has improved. And this has happened in less than 7 months and without burdening our treasury. Mr. Speaker, that is the legacy of Van West Charles. Mr. Speaker, not only have we removed the VAT on water imposed by the previous government, we have reinstated the water subsidy that was removed. As a result, the removal of VAT on water consumption that exceeded $1,500 or 14 cubic meter over 3,000 customers will see their disposable income increase by some $107 million a year. With the subsidy reinstatement, more than 26,300 pensioners will be directly impacted by some $300 million increase in their disposable income. Government National Budget Initiative on 2021 have once again demonstrated our commitment to the people of Guyana by announcing a 5% reduction in water tariffs across the board, targeting all levels of society, all levels of consumers. This initiative, when implemented, is estimated to provide an additional $248 million benefit to the people of Guyana for a minimum of 173,000 customers. Overall, Mr. Speaker, government's initiative in the water sector in less than a year will provide an estimated $655 million increase in disposable income to the people of Guyana. The GWI therefore now operates on a new 5-year strategic plan that aligns with our national priorities of providing clean, reliable, and affordable water. In this regard, Mr. Speaker, we are focused on increasing access to treated water coverage to 90% to reduce our non-revenue water and modernize the infrastructure. And this, Mr. Speaker, is a commitment the People's Progressive Party Civic will intend to implement. Mr. Speaker, in conclusion, in under 7 months, short months, 7 months, my ministry has made significant progress in addressing the challenges within the housing and water sectors. We have chartered a course and our minds are set on meeting our targets. I have absolutely no doubt that we will restore this sector to its former glory and even surpass it. The PPPC government is not about talking, Mr. Speaker. We are about doing the work. We are focused on keeping the promises we made to the citizens of this great land of ours, and together we will. I therefore commend and recommend this 2021 budget to the House as the path to recovery for our nation. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.